Hey everyone, welcome to Tea Time with Chris and Jason of Group of Seven Comics. A time for Jason and I to catch up, talk about Group of Seven Comics, what's going on, as well as just what's going on in our lives, what we're reading, what we're into, talk a little bit about our creative process, and how things are going. So, oh, and there he is.
I just got back from a nice brisk walk where I got to think about all the things I'd love to say to you if I ever had the nerve.
You just
Yeah.
you're just building up. You're building up. Yeah, Chandler says,
Yeah, no, it was
"Some right
a good
back at
walk.
you, Chandler."
Hey, Scott. That's yeah. Scott made a mistake today. He texted me um, and got me talking, and I just like here's 20 messages that you now have to read instead of getting your new secret project done. So
I could have told Scott that was a bad idea.
yes.
I could
Never message Jason. Yeah, I have too much to say.
about
Yeah,
everything, about everything.
about everything. Yeah, there you go. Cheers to Mr.
Cheers,
Chandler.
cheers to you.
What? Hold on a second. This is tea time. What are you drinking?
This okay, so it is tea time, but I didn't want tea, so instead I am drinking what's called maple sweet water, which is made from the sap of maple trees. So it smells kind of like okay, maple syrup, right? Familiar, love it. All these things, all these things. What you just got asked a very funny question.
Yes.
Um, all these things. Do you remember as a kid at like maple syrup festivals, or just when maple syrup kind of came out around the time of the year, like March or so? They're mostly in tins. Like you kind of crack the tin open. This kind
Right.
of smells like the inside of an aluminum tin, with a
You're
hint of
not selling
maple.
it.
Hint of maple. So
Inside of an aluminum tin.
it's
You're
right,
not
right.
selling
And
it,
so
buddy.
if you've ever put your mouth on a maple tap and
Right.
just sucked the tree, that's what this is.
Let's just quickly address some of Chandler's points here. So he wants to know
Questions,
who would
really.
win in a fight. If you ever read Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly's All-Star Superman, they ask a cosmic sphinx, like an infinite cosmic sphinx,
Sure,
asks
sure.
Superman the question: when an unstoppable force is faced with an immovable object, who would win? And the answer, of course, is they both surrender. Right? Like we know that neither of us
I,
we don't fight. We don't bother. We're like two samurai masters. We
right.
size each other
We
up, and our
stand
swords stay in the
right.
sheath. It's
We
like,
just
dude,
and
yeah, we
then
know.
we die of
I would kill him.
decrepit. You
I would
would.
kill
You've
him.
got a little bit more
The word is rage, Chris.
rage as a goalie. In my spare time, pucks to various parts of the bodies. I don't like being
Right.
taken out of games. I don't mind being run. I don't mind getting physical. Don't mind the play in front of the net. So I'm just
Right.
gonna say that I could probably take a lot of punishment that Jason, with his rage, when he clicks into that rage factor,
Yeah.
could dish out. But
Yeah.
like, what would the final outcome be? Likely
Don't
the end.
spoil.
What?
I think. See, I think Scott has been wondering this question since he first met us,
Right.
and we want to play the long game here. So we
Right.
draw this out. You know what I mean?
Well, what
Like
I was going to
we
suggest
just show a
was
little ankle, just
right.
show a little wrist. We're not showing the good stuff here. We're just gonna show a little bit of skin, just a
I
little bit of collarbone. You know?
I think it would warp the fabric of time and reality
Right.
completely. Like
Of
I
course, that's a
think it would
given.
just be the black hole to which the Earth then just sinks into
So our physical confrontation would be the singularity that ends space time.
space time. Exactly.
Perfect segue into the next thing we're going to talk about here.
What are we going to talk about?
Tempted to, but anyway, well, yes,
I did write a scene at one point, which who knows, maybe it'll come back again. But the idea is Conn Smythe is in a bar on the front in some kind of a military establishment, some kind of thing that serves the troops,
I
and they're
remember this.
playing, and the big song that came out during that period. There's a number of them, but a very popular one, certainly in the United States. I don't know if it's called Over There, but that's how Over There, Over There. And it really was the anthem, the unofficial anthem of the American doughboy soldier about going. And I think I had a scene where there was some boisterous Americans singing the song, and Conn Smythe just kind of gives the look, and they drop their mitts. Exactly.
And hopefully they enjoy their company afterward as well. Like it doesn't end with any major animosity.
Exactly.
Right. Now, it's funny because the version of Conn Smythe that you and I have in the comics, and the one we have in our heads kind of, is a drinker. He feels like a good buddy to go to the bar with. Go ahead, please. Yes.
Yeah, he's a teetotaler. Which is a term which was a description of those people who actually not only abstained from drink, but actually actively spoke of its ills and connected it to societal issues.
We have a few of those sort of situations where we have characters that they serve a particular function within the team that strays from the historical narrative that's in place, and I both like it and am sometimes conflicted by are we taking too many liberties for fun. And I think that's a good thing that we get to do, because there is no finished answer to that question.
You were mentioning earlier the classroom workshops and things. It remains the flashpoint for discussion,
right?
Which really opens up, looking at historical figures as complex human beings.
Yes, that's a really good point. Thank you for helping me with that.
I'm happy to help. It's the sap water.
You just put your mouth right on the tree.
I'm surprised you haven't done that. Anyway, so yeah, it's a great opening for those kinds of conversations to happen, to take place, and then
right.
so it's valuable for us. It's valuable for us from a creative perspective. It's also valuable for us in our objective of bringing these kinds of conversations to the classroom as well.
Or did that inform part of your motivation to want to create fictional characters?
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did, because I think we've spoken about this before in a number of interviews and panels and things about how the 7 characters in Group of 7 are larger than life. Is one way to describe them. In the sense they belong to they belong to a Canadian history, in the sense where these names are on street corners, they're on high schools, they absolutely go beyond the name of the person. That name has been co-opted by history, by the country, by other organizations, however we want to see that through. With Peregrines, I initially was thinking, oh great, I really want to bring the story of these Canadian Army nurses forward, and reading up, doing the research again, just like with Group of 7, finding women who are already extraordinary, but then reading more into their military files, because of course they are available online, to look more into these. And I had a number of four or so actual women who were nurses, who you wouldn't know by name. I consider myself someone who, if I come across a name, it's a familiar name in Canadian history, or it is not a familiar name. And these women do not carry familiar names in that regard. And so although their deeds their deeds were incredible, and so I wanted to kind of bring that forward to influence the story. But when it came to it, it made me realize after a while, because we really put these characters in really extraordinary situations, more extraordinary than Group of 7. We really do put them in scenarios beyond that. And so, these women, most of them, or at least I could tell it because I actually read the articles connected to it. They still have family around. They're still active in, whether it's in Ontario or Quebec. It's someone's great grandmother who was involved. And not to spoil anything, but certainly the promo art that we've shown is they're in the air. They're in the air. They've jumped out of a Zeppelin. They've done a number of things, and if I had thought of, did someone just take my great grandmother's name and add it to a character, or use that character, and then do things like toss her out of an airplane, it just it just seemed to not be a good fit for
Right.
what we're trying to accomplish. But again, what I think we and I after having that kind of realization, because earlier drafts have those character names in them,
Right.
and the notes certainly are there, is that we can use those people in their lives to inspire the fictional characters, and then again, if we're having these conversations, if we're having these discussions, whether it's in classrooms or not, to use that again as the inspiration. Like, these people come, our fictional characters are actually inspired by these very real people. And so let's use that as the gateway to talk about these very real people.
I've been going through the process of trying to nail down the way the women look so that I can replicate it over and over throughout the next 4 issues, given that was one of the one of the many shortcomings of or one of the realities of the learning process of making comics is, like, you better know what your character looks like when you start, and be able to draw them consistently while you go. I remember getting the feedback from the valuable feedback. I believe it was your dad who said after maybe 2 issues, he's like, we don't know who all the characters are every time. You drop their names at the beginning. And so for issue 3, like, we put the names in, and not just as the characters spoke to each other, but just like a roll call in their first panel. So you kind of knew who everyone was, at least to get on board. But given that the books aren't in color, and that there were 7 men in the first story, it's not always easy to keep track of who's who and what's what as you're going. But with these 4 women, I really want them to look distinct, and and fit the genre, the visual genre that we're going toward. But I want to also find a way that we could recognize them, that they get distilled down to some basic features, but you kind of have to draw them, 100 times before you really know what they look like. So I have a lot of drawings of these 4 women very differently. Each one looks quite different until maybe it was November. I started just kind of hitting stride, and a couple of them started to come out consistently, and it's a good feeling.
It just challenges us, and I think it's, you need some challenge in your creativity, not necessarily challenging which would impede your progress, but just to think, because we're not interested in doing the same comic.
True.
I mean, to a degree, there are many familiarities between, right?
Sure, but there's also that desire to find the groove, and the groove can be perceived as a rut. That you're in that creative rut for a while, but when you kind of figure out how to get your process done, how to reach get your pages finished and get your books published, you kind of want to hit a groove for a stretch of time. And I think that might be a generational thing too, where if this had been, let's just say, the 1950s, you and I would have made a comic every month, along with a few other individuals who help with the process, like an inker and a colorist and a letterer and all that stuff, and an editor. But we would have found our groove and done it for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And put out hundreds of issues.
It's funny you bring it up, because a wise friend lent me this as well. That being you, the friend.
Sure, you're generous.
I am. Alan Moore is writing for comics, and in it he speaks of that exact thing. He talks about, for lack, he doesn't call it the groove. Alan Moore would never call it the groove, but he speaks of it, and he speaks to it, and then he talks about. And have you read this in a while, by the way? It's been some time.
I leafed through it before I gave it to you in case I never saw it again.
Okay, fair enough. Because it has like when his original essay from the 80s, and then 15 years later the follow-up, right? And he looks back, and so but again, a really fascinating, interesting dive into the craft of writing comics, that but not not in a book form or anything, or coming from coming from a position. It's coming from a position of well, it even when he's writing it, it's kind of a one-off. He doesn't really, and so there's a looseness to it, which has a real sense of kind of just realness, where it's kind of real talk, but also I know, right? Alan Moore real talk could be a YouTube show. And but it comes off as intended, as I'm gonna write this, and I'm not gonna think too much about it. And anyway, so it was a valuable resource. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Oh,
Really
my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm very happy that I'm happy to share,
yeah.
obviously. So much so that there's a comic that I'm convinced I shared with somebody that I can't find anywhere in my house. And it's driving me up the wall. So
Which
I've
one
asked
is it again?
everybody. It's Death of Superman.
Death of Superman.
It's a trade
That small
paperback featuring
comic book, Death of
like
Superman.
no, it's 6 issues I think, and I've been spending all of January doing these warm-ups where I'm recreating certain pages. I'm recreating the pages in order, but I can't find my source material. I can't find the book from which I want to draw, just because I was watching Cartoonist Kayfabe and they were talking real talk with Alan Moore. Alan Moore Real Talk. They were talking about that particular issue, Superman 75, and how this most epic of moments in the 90s in DC is kind of drawn in a way that doesn't lend itself correctly to the narrative. There's some disconnects. They perceive some disconnects between the way it's laid out and the narrative itself. And so I thought to myself, I can do page layouts fast. It's a good way to warm up. And so I started doing those layouts, and I've done 9 of them so far. One's ready for tomorrow already. But I'm having to pause stupid live video again to look at page layout because I can't find my copy anywhere, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, it's yielded fair results, something that one would expect given my process is the way it is. So anyway, I don't mind. I love loaning stuff to people. I love sharing comics
I love that
with friends and family.
I love that you loan things to me all the time.
Yeah, it's partially that I'm just happy to share, so we get additional fodder for conversation, and partially that I think you're deprived because your comics library is just too small.
The pits.
It's the pits. Yeah.
Like,
No, I just love sharing because it gives somebody else to talk about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. What have you been reading this week?
So aside from the comics, or leafing through them more, I've been reading. I went through the Wonder Woman Dead Earth saga 4-issue DC Black Label, and it's funny, we were texting about this, and you beat me to the punch when how was it? And all I could think about while I was reading it was how metal this series is, how hard rock metal this series is, and I know that over the last year, DC has also put out a metal line, with the Batman Who Laughs, and I don't actually know. I haven't read any of those, so I don't know really anything. No, this is just Wonder Woman, and it's so metal. You don't even need to say it.
Yeah.
I loved it, enjoyed it. The art was, we talked about the art, was just intriguing and not pretty, but loved it. Really fit the tone and the setting and the mood, and just again a really great retelling of an origin. Really just taking a different point of view on the origin and how that lends itself to impacting our popular understanding of how the heroes and those worlds interact. So you start, instead of starting here, you're starting here, and what does this do to the world, right? It's so thank you, it was great, loved it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to share as always. I love the idea that there's a character that's 80 years old and here's a fresh take. Here's someone who comes along who just puts it on its head and does it a different way, and that just always speaks to the resiliency of what the DNA of the character, that you can tell something completely different, and it still feels like Wonder Woman. It still hits all the beats it needs to hit, and it scratches an itch that no other comic book has scratched about that character. So that was very cool. What have I been reading?
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned before, this massive tome arrived, the IDW Artist Edition for Bravo for Adventure by Alex Toth, his early 80s stunt pilot adventure romp. It's all in black and white, seemingly, but it is, high-res scans or photographs of the original pages. So
Cool.
the notes are there on the top of every page, and all of Alex Toth's corrections are there. So it's more not about reading the book for its literal narrative. It's like taking a course, like a master class. He's someone who absolutely excels to the highest level of cartooning at taking something and simplifying it down to its purest form. So he's able to sort of do the most with the least amount of lines. And all the artists that I love Toth and speak highly of his work. Everyone who ever speaks of him today says really fun things about him as a character, that he was like one of the greatest curmudgeons of all time, and was famously hostile, would turn on you on a dime. But his artwork is deceptively simple, makes you think that you could draw until you try to draw like this.
Right.
But there's an infinite amount that I have to learn from him. His use of black and white, just as those two tones, is absolutely ingenious. I could go on and on. So I'm going to be paging through this probably for the rest of 2021, and trying to learn as much of it as I can without without stealing anything from him directly, but hopefully it improves the quality of the way I draw and what I choose to put on the page and what I choose to leave out. And
Right.
looking at that damn Superman comic isn't going to help me leave out extra lines. It's going to make me draw more lines, whereas Toth is going to really keep things simplified. And he's awesome, and his hand lettering is beautiful. So that's what I'm reading. Bravo for Adventure.
Well, it looks like
I love the
Scott
name.
agrees with you, and he actually has a question. He says, have you guys read Roth's critique of Steve Rude back in the day?
I have. I do that deep dive into cartoonists and into it's okay.
Typo.
And into I listen to and partially watch a ton of YouTube content while I draw. And there's on the internet, basically Alex Toth is a generation or two older than Steve Rude, both American cartoonists, and they both have a timeless quality to their work. And Toth is famous for, among other things, corresponding with younger cartoonists, any cartoonist. If you could reach him often, you could have a lifelong correspondence with the guy. And then all of a sudden he would tell you to piss off and never want to write to you again. He was one of those kind of complicated figures. And so Steve Rude was going to be drawing some Space Ghost, which is an Alex Toth design and a creation. And
right, you were saying Hanna-Barbera, right?
Right. He was
right?
the original Super Friends design.
Right.
Space Ghost, as I said. Yeah, Johnny Quest. It's that world, right? Steve Rude received incredibly a mean and not productive feedback from Toth about working on Space Ghost and his drawing. And Steve Rude is amazing. He's an amazing cartoonist. Nexus is his property.
Jason, it's been awesome talking to you again.
Good to see you.
You too. Stay safe, stay healthy. We will chat again in a week. Actually, that's not true. We'll chat again in a week on this platform, but I'll text you after this.
Have a good evening, Chris. Say hi to your family for me, and cheers, buddy.
You too, man. Take care.
All right. Bye.